Hello and welcome to Bat Flips and Nerds, the baseball podcast with a British twist. I am your host, Ben Carter, for a very special episode, not least because I have the main man, Russell-isms, here with me. How are you, Russell?
I'm doing good, Ben. I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, but I think you might be a little bit more.
I am very much looking forward to this because we've got no one else but the man himself, Clint Hurdle, joining us to chat a little bit of baseball. It's a privilege, as you say, as a Rockies fan. Clint is someone who I've looked up to for a long time, so it's great to get a chance to have a conversation. For those that don't know, Cliff has had an extraordinary career in baseball and life in baseball, really. Played for 4 different franchises across a 10-year career, and obviously managed 2 franchises too, over 2,500 games as a manager at that. And we were just discussing before we started recording that he is back at spring training in Scottsdale, Arizona with the Colorado Rockies again. Do you know what year in baseball this is for you now, Clint? How many it's been?
It's a big number, Ben. It's number 50.
Wow,
50. Yeah.
that is extraordinary. Well, congratulations. That's an impressive effort. But thanks so much for joining us. How are you? Thank you for coming on.
I'm healthy and happy, probably better than I deserve. And I do appreciate you all adjusting the time with me and for me today. Thank you very much.
No problem, no problem. It's great to chat. I think we'll get into all parts of your career and other things as part of this conversation, but I thought we might start with one of your more recent projects, which is your new book. I know it's only been released very recently, and I know that was a labour of love and passion. I think I heard on a different podcast you talking about the trials and tribulations you went through to get this thing all the way through to publishing, but I'd be interested to hear what the process of writing that was like. I know you wrote every word yourself. What was it like to go back through your life and career in baseball and put together some thoughts and hurdle-isms, as you call them?
It was, you know what, it was therapeutic in some ways. It was enlightening in some ways to, revisit some good times, some hard times, some sad times, some fantastic times, and then make sure that I had the facts straight by calling people up and revisiting some of the sequence of events. Fact check does work, spell check does work, but you need to talk to people when you're talking about people, especially when you're talking about relationships with people. And I think we matched everything up very, very well. And it basically was a book that became a labor of love. It's just trying to share experience, strength, and hope. It's not that I've known it all. Matter of fact, I didn't know a whole lot. I've learned a lot the hard way, but I thought it was a good time based on a challenge from a good friend of mine, John Gordon, who's a very, very well known inspirational writer and speaker. He has 17 best selling books. He basically just challenged me to write my own book. I was looking for an easier, softer way. I wanted a co author to write the book with me, somebody who had written books, who would do all the hard work, and I just spit out brilliance from time to time and share these stories, let him document everything, but it just didn't work out that way. And John told me, Clint, you need to share your own story with your own words because I think it has value and I think it will help. So I took upon the task, and it probably took me a little over 9 months from the time I typed the first word to the time I typed the last, and then a couple more months of putting an index, putting acknowledgments in, coordinating some endorsements and things. So almost a year, and it's out now. It seems to have some good traction. I've gotten a lot of positive reviews. And I think anytime a book can make you laugh and cry, to do both, and that's an enjoyable read. So far, so good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I did have a check before we started recording, and the book is available on Amazon here in the UK. So fans who are on this side of the pond are able to get hold of it and check that out. I would recommend doing so. There are some amazing stories from well today as well. You mentioned you're in spring training with the Colorado Rockies. I'm fascinated. What does your role look like nowadays? How involved are you with the team? What does spring training number 50 look like for you at the moment?
My job title is a special assistant to the general manager.
Ah,
And as I went through baseball, I ran into a bunch of different special assistants to the general manager. It seemed to be a role that was somewhat defined. You could bounce around a lot of different ways. You could work in the minor leagues, you could work in the big leagues, you could do some scouting, you could work some player development. And you basically did things that maybe the general manager didn't want to do, or to help him, provide him with a different lens. to see things. So I was actually retired for 2 years after I was fired by the Rockies in 19. Um, I had a little downtime and I thought things through and realized that I was going to get paid for 2 years to not work, which had never happened to me before in my life. And I thought I'd move upon it with two young children at home still in high school. So the middle of November, I stopped working. The middle of March, the world stopped working. COVID hit and everything was shut down. So I was able to homeschool a couple kids, spend a couple years at home, and then the Rockies called and asked me to basically spend time in our player development system. It's what I've done a lot of. I'm helping grow kids, grow the young players up, helping to grow the young managers and coaches up, and report back to our general manager and the people at the major league level on who's looking good, who's showing improvement, maybe who do we need to talk about in a little different venue. It's been very rewarding. Our farm system has become one of our strongest assets, even though our major league record has been really rough the last 2 seasons. We have developed a lot of young talent. We've got more young pitchers coming, more young players coming. We saw some of them last year, two Gold Glovers, Tovar and Doyle. We saw some big arms in the bullpen show up. We got more guys coming. So that's been my role. I work about 2 weeks a month, which is really, really cool. Up and
Sounds
down
great.
the minor league system, up and down the minor league system, a trip to the Dominican. I do some instruction league work. So all baseball related. My finger's still on the pulse of all things Rockies, but I also still have time to get home and spend with my our daughter Maddie, and who's still at home, and my wife Carla.
Well, that sounds ideal. And you've got me fired up about the Rockies just with your small tidbits there on the future looking bright. That is what we want to hear. I think now maybe we can take it all the way back to the beginning, really, of your professional career at least, and maybe even just before that. I saw that maybe things could have been very different on your journey because I believe you had the offer to play college football and baseball at the University of Miami rather than turn pro. How strongly did you consider pursuing that path rather than going straight into the pros?
I probably didn't consider as much as my parents did. My dad was not an agent by any means, but he was very committed to leveraging the best opportunity for me. We didn't know when I'd get drafted, what round, what pick, but the football scholarship combined with the baseball scholarship, I should say, there were two teams that would let me play both sports, University of Virginia, University of Miami. I had a lot of individual teams offer either football or baseball. The most interesting concept or opportunity I had was I had an academic scholarship offer to Harvard University.
Wow.
My mother, from a very early age, stressed the importance of grades and of learning and of reading. And to this day, I'm still an avid reader. I still want to learn. One of the chapters in the book Hurdle-isms is about a white belt mentality, being a lifelong learner. But my dad wanted to make sure we had options and tried to leverage those options to the best of his ability. So to play college football and baseball, it was probably real until a point it wasn't real to me because since the time I was 5, I wanted to be a big league ball player. I wanted
Yeah.
to be on a team that won a World Series. I wanted to, I wanted to do that. And when the offer came and the offer was significant enough that it was a no-brainer, we were going to go to baseball.
And so, like,
I think we're glad you
how
did.
different was that world, Clint? Because, like, obviously, Ben and we've been following baseball for 15, 20 years. What was the draft like back in that day, back when you went in the first round? Was there anything? How long did it take you to actually know that it's happened? It's not being released on social media in an instant, is it?
No, it wasn't. You know what? It's almost like I feel like it was in black and white. It wasn't even in color. It was so long ago. Um, Scouts would see you play. You would fill out a note card for them. They would hold the note card. Every once in a while, you would get a phone call on a rotary phone from a scout. He'd pick your brain. Some of them would actually show up at your house and ask a few questions. But the day of the draft, I was told there was 3 clubs that let me know that there's a good chance that I would go in the first round. And if I did, there would be a follow-up phone call. Well, one of the teams was the Oakland Athletics. They were picking last. This was in the 70s when the Oakland Athletics were one of the best teams in baseball. Charlie Finley still owned the team at that time, and he was kind of a no-nonsense owner. So the scout told me, hey, look, we draft you in the first round. Here's my number. You call me, and the offer's $25,000. That's it. That's all we got. So it was kind of a boo-boo lip it was kind of sad because you work your whole life. You think maybe I'm going to go in the first round. A guy calls you up and said, hey, if we draft you, this is all you're going to get. And you got to call us to let us know that you're taking it or not. So fortunately, I wasn't drafted by them. I was drafted by the Royals, the 9th pick in the nation. And after some negotiations by my dad, we found a common ground. We both believed it was a fair deal, but it was a rotary phone call. And then it was the scout coming over to my house a day later and us sitting down and having pizza, with my sisters, my mom and dad, just, 6 or 7 people. It was nothing like the, extravaganza that it's turned in today. It's truly, it's a celebration. It's an event. We do it over the All-Star break now. It's a big profile deal. But back in the day, guys, it was not that big of a deal. But for us, it was because it was still the culmination of a dream since you had in the backyard since you were 5.
No, I was just gonna say that, like, from some bios that I've read, that like the Kansas City scout, Bill Fisher, was somebody that you were quite friends when the family was friends with anyway, because you'd known him for a while. So I guess it felt, was he the one you did know the best as well, and did that play like anything into that conversation?
It didn't hurt by any means. Bill had seen me play for 3 years. He actually came to the first game I played at high school. I was a sophomore, and at that time, sophomore was 10th grade. We had a senior catcher, Waldo Williams, who was an All-American football player in high school, ended up going to Florida State, behind the plate. So all the scouts were going to see Waldo. I happened to be a sophomore on the team, which didn't happen very often in those days. And I caught his eye in 10th grade, and eventually he would have, I think, what they call impromptu workouts. So whether they were legal or not, I don't know. But he'd say, hey, meet me at Cocoa Rockledge Baseball Park, and I'll throw you some BP. And what kid wouldn't want to go hit BP, from a big league scout? So we must have done that a dozen times. He knew my mom, knew my dad, by far and away the closest person in the professional game that we knew. So it was very sweet that he was the guy that they drafted us. He was the one that was able to come over because we all kind of celebrated the success. He put the work in, we put the work in. We had put it together as a team, and we'd see where it go. And the funny part was, a few years later, I was traded to Cincinnati, and Bill Fisher was actually the pitching coach on the Cincinnati Reds at that time.
Oh, wow.
So we got to kind of rekindle our friendship.
Oh, that's amazing.
Awesome. I know one thing that happened very soon after you were drafted was the Sports Illustrated cover. That's one of the things that I'm sure comes up in a lot of the conversations that you have, and the front cover of that 1976, was it, outing, the this year's phenom on the front cover with your photo. There must have been, at that time, that was the equivalent of going viral on social media, right? There must have been enormous pressure on your shoulders and a weight of expectation that came with that. Did you feel it at the time? Looking back now, did it have any effect on you, or were you just excited to play ball and ready to show what you could do?
All of the above. I think I was excited to play ball. We had been given a heads up. The SI group had been around the spring training and taken pictures of various young players. They'll never tell you who's going to be on the cover normally until you're on the cover. But they let us know that when that edition would come out. And one of the funnier things that happened to me was they took my picture. They took a picture of Willie Wilson, Rich Gale, 3 guys on our team, a bunch of other young players. But every morning on the way into the ballpark, I would stop at a 7-Eleven and I would get a quart of milk and a honey bun. It's like a big biscuit, a big donut every morning. And normally the same kid was working there in the morning. He's about my age. Well, this morning I walk in and I put the honey bun down, the milk on the counter. I look at him. He looks at me. He looks down at the counter where there's 3 magazines. They didn't have a magazine rack back then. You go into convenience stores now, there's 50 magazines. They had 3 magazines: Newsweek, Life, and Sports Illustrated. So he looks down. I'm not even watching what he's looking at. And he looks back at me. He looks down again. So the second time he looks down, I look down. I see my picture on the cover of the Sports Illustrated. I look at him. He looks at me. I freak out. I walk out of the store. No milk, no honey bun. I get in my car and I just sat there for a couple minutes thinking, okay, something's changing. I didn't even know what it was, but I knew something was going to be different. So I don't think at the time I realized how much I was going to internalize maybe some pressure or try and do more than I was capable of doing to validate the fact that I was on the cover of a national magazine at the age of 20 years old. I go to a clubhouse, an hour, 45 minutes later, and there's guys that have been playing 10 years in the big leagues that have never had their picture on the cover of anything. And now this young kid walks in as a rookie. He's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And, there wasn't bad blood in the clubhouse. I think guys were just kind of like, really? Like, what's he done? But when you get out within the league throughout the rest of the season and you're playing other teams and guys have been around and you're this young kid, it got a little dicey at times. I tried probably to do more than I was capable of doing, again, at times to validate, that. I won't say that that was the reason, but I didn't. I learned a lot of lessons. And I think that's the one thing that I'm most proud of is regardless of how I handle it, good, bad, or indifferent, lessons learned from it, yes. And then to be able to recreate a new narrative from it. Because I really never was a phenom playing. I've never been a phenom managing or coaching, but I was able to take that career and turn it into a coach and a manager and a person now who's been 50 years in the game and still hopefully providing some impact and some influence and just trying to help people on their way.
You've kind of preempted my next question a little bit there. I'm interested to know what you said that it did have a big impact on the kind of rest of your career after you were done playing. But what were the specific lessons or the biggest lessons, I suppose, that you took from having been there, done that, played the game at the highest level that you then took into your philosophy coaching, whether that be, helping out young hitters and more stuff to do with technique and the ways to be a successful hitter at the major league level, but also, I guess, later in your career as a manager, as a clubhouse leader, as someone who had to galvanize a whole locker room, having gone through struggles at the major league level, having been on the front cover of SI, all of this other stuff. What were the main things that kind of tooled you up to be really successful in your post-playing career?
Well, I think, Russ and Ben, just to give you probably got the back notes. But there was a lot of other challenges throughout my life that I had to meet. Some self-created. I was divorced twice, and I'm not proud of that. But there's a lot of collateral damage that comes with divorce. There's a lot of emotions, and unfortunately, I was the common fabric in both of those. By going through failed marriages and maybe not producing on the field like a lot of people think you should, I tried to find ways to numb the pain, and I actually drank myself into becoming an alcoholic. And it was a life that I was living in disguise a lot of times because a lot of people never probably knew the pain or the sometimes embarrassment that I wasn't what I should have been in the eyes of so many other people. And my parents have been married their whole life. My dad's 91, my mother's 89. They've been married going to be 60 years, and I can't even have two marriages that add up to like 15 or 10 or whatever it was. So you feel that. You're trying to coach then. You're done playing. You weren't probably what everybody thought you should have been as a player. Now, what can you be as a coach? No idea about managing. That happened down the road. But there was a lot of opportunities for me to learn from mistakes, to seek help from others, and then to take responsibility for my actions, not make excuses. All these things add up to perfect coaching lessons in a lot of ways because as my players got to realize over time, there wasn't a whole lot they could bring into me as a coach or a manager that I hadn't walked through in some degree or some level, whether it be on the field or off the field. And at least more often than not, I could tell them, hey, I'm not sure what's going to work for you, but I can tell you what won't work for you. The couple of things that I did, those won't work. Trust me. And I think that's what enabled me. I mean, when you guys think about it, I managed two teams for 17 years. We never won a World Series. That's unheard of. So you must be doing something right. You must be taking care of the brand. You must be growing relationships, the community, the players, all of it. There must be something good going on for people to keep you in charge of organizations that are worth billions of dollars if you're just a twice divorced recovering alcoholic. There's got to be more to you than that.
Yeah, I think before we get into talking about the specifics of like your managing career, we have maybe like a cheeky question, but is there an easier job than being a hitting coach in the pre-humidor course field? Like the ball goes far, like just hit it in the air, lads. Come on.
There were times. Actually, Larry Walker told me when I first took the job, he goes, "Hey, when we're at home, you can take the games off at home. You don't have to show up. We need you on the road because, the rage was the Rockies crush people at home. They don't hit anything on the road.
Mm-hmm.
They could take batting practice in the lobby at the hotel on the road, but you put them at Coors Field and they're scoring 15 runs a night, whether you like it or not. The easiest job in baseball at times, absolutely, Russ, was being the hitting coach for the Blake Street Bombers. And if you look back at those 5 guys, the back of their baseball cards, the numbers, I can remember looking at Galarraga in 1997. His numbers at the All-Star break were better than my career numbers in 10 years. I mean, what he had done at the half. And then you got Burks, you got Walker, you got Castillo, you got Bichette. In Galarraga, it was crazy. And to work with those guys, yeah, it wasn't hard. It was harder on the road. But one of the other blessings I had later, after managing in Colorado, I got fired. I went to Texas. And to be the hitting coach that year for the Texas Rangers in 2010, when we went to the World Series as well, Josh Hamilton, Nelly Cruz, Michael Young, Elvis Andrus, Ian Kinsler, Mitch Moore, Josh Hamilton. You know what? That's a pretty good job. Those are good jobs to have.
Great jobs to have. And I'm interested that you brought him up, because I was going to maybe ask you about Josh Hamilton. He is someone else who obviously has had publicised issues off the field with alcohol and other things as well. And I imagine it's probably no coincidence that year you mentioned, 2010, when you worked with him, was the best year of his career. He had an unbelievable season. What was that relationship like between you and him? Did you feel like you were able to connect with him in a way just because of the history that you'd had with some of those off-field struggles, with some of those mental struggles, and that kind of maybe helped him click a little bit more on the field and compartmentalize in a way?
I think that's true. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think the other thing that was it wasn't a coincidence. Ron Washington, who was the manager of the Rangers at the time, was my third base coach when I managed in the Mets system the last 2 years in AAA. Ron and I had history. Ron knew of my history. I knew of his history. John Daniels was an intern for the Rockies in the early 2000s, working in the video room. John and I developed a relationship. So when I go there to interview, it was about baseball. It was about hitting. It was about being an offensive coordinator more than, a hitting coach, because they had talented offensive people. They had really never gotten over the hump. How do you help Wash put the lineup together so we can win a 3-2 game, we can win a 6-5 game, or we can win a 14-12 game? Different ways to beat people. But when Josh Hamilton's name came up as we were identifying players, John said, truthfully, he said, I really believe that you were meant to have this job to help Josh. He goes, I know, because he got to know Josh. He goes, there's a lot of symmetry in what he's experienced, and I know what you've experienced by my conversations with John when he was in Colorado. And to this day, Josh and I still stay in contact. It was one of the most interesting years I've ever had, because we actually rebuilt his stance and his swing in the middle of a season, which I've never done with anybody before. We had gone through a process of events, but to watch the numbers that kid put up that year, to win the MVP, for us to go to the World Series. And if you look at the numbers he put up from June 1st to the end of the season, they're like those Nintendo numbers, the game you play on a computer. But to see the joy that it brought, not just to him, but the joy that it brought to the team, to see the best version of Josh on the field and in the clubhouse, that's what life's about. When you can experience things together, you're going to experience hard times, you're going to experience good times, but to be in it together, to be connected together, that was one of the years I'll always remember. Very, 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 very fun.
So let's go through that kind of like that start of that managerial career then, when you took over the Rockies in 2002. Kind of, I think reading that you kind of said when you had an instantaneous bounce back, it was something that you were kind of just anticipating that was going to happen anyway. We see it, I think, quite a lot in a lot of sports when the new manager comes in, the regression to the mean happens and the guys perform probably the way that they should, and everybody's just like, oh, the new manager's a genius. But like you were quite experimental, I think, in those early days of kind of like being with the Rockies, the attempts at like a 4-man rotation, like when you get into like the 2007 season, and I think I'll let Ben talk about Rocktober specifically. How did you find those first few years being kind of like fully in charge of the team?
Well, it was a surreal, very surreal, because when Dan O'Dowd called me up one morning and said, "I'm coming over to your house. I got to talk to you," I thought he was coming over to fire me. We weren't in a good spot. Buddy Bell was in his third year managing. Buddy Bell's a tremendous baseball man. I learned a lot from him, and we weren't performing well. And it's usually the coaches that may go first. A couple coaches or the manager. You can't get rid of 25 players. But we were at a point, and Dan had made some comments that just my imagination would run with him. Okay, we need to start hitting or I'm out. But I can remember Dan saying, "Look, are you going to be home?" "Yes, I am. I'm coming to your house." Well, I've never had a general manager ever tell me he's coming. So I call up my dad and I said, "Dad, this is crazy. The GM's coming to my house." He goes, "Well, what for?" I go, "He's coming to fire me." And he goes, "Well, I know you've been saying it's been hard. You were kind of talking about if it doesn't get better, there's no telling what could happen." He goes, "So you think he's going to fire you?" "Why else would he be coming to my house?" I said, "He's going to save me, though. The walk of shame," which I've had as a player a couple of times, is, when you're told you're not good enough now and you got to go back to your locker, pack a bag, and then walk out of the clubhouse with your bag in your hand. That's quite humbling, but it happens and it's real and it's a great learning lesson. So I said, "Well, I don't have to do that. He'll get rid of me at home. I'll go get my bag later when nobody's there. It'll all work out." Well, he walks me through the process, and then at the end, he's kind of going, "Yeah, and I just let Buddy Bell go this morning. I'm just wondering what's coming next." He goes, "And my reason of being here is I'm asking you to be the interim manager and start running the club starting tonight."
Wow.
And I was like, "Excuse me?"
Not quite the.
And he goes, "No, I want you to start running the club, then I want you to be the interim manager." And he goes, "Why? Does that surprise you?" I go, "In all transparency, yes. Dan, I thought you were coming here to fire." And we laughed, but it just goes to show you facts aren't feelings, right? And your feelings sometimes can take you in a direction you really don't need to go. So to go to your point, Russ, one of the things I wanted to make sure I did with the club coming in, we were going to experiment. This wasn't rocket science. We weren't curing cancer. We're playing baseball and we're not playing good baseball. What do we need to do to just play good, solid baseball and see where that takes us? So we were going to get creative, and it was, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll try something else. But it was just having the ability to not think everything is life or death, and everything is either wrong or right, and everything is either good or bad. Sometimes, you can experiment, and sometimes you work your way into things, and it shows trust, and it shows cohesion, and it shows a need to depend upon somebody else. So I thought those were important things to bring to the table based on what I learned. And, eventually, I think the players, they bought into it to some degree. There's no doubt. But like you said, I mean, I've also been the manager that got fired in '09, and Jim Tracy ended up taking the team to the playoffs. So I've been on both ends of that spectrum, because nobody shows up as a major league manager, GM, and says, "You know what? Let me see what I can do to screw things up today. Let me see what I can do to just catapult our team into last place and go on a losing streak." Nobody does that, even though that's what happens sometimes.
I have a lot of questions on the Rockies, but I'm going to try and keep them succinct. But I think we should definitely talk about 2007, where the Rockies went into that year kind of looking for some inspiration to get back to the playoffs. And for a while, it was questionable whether they would get there, of course. And then in September and October, I don't know how else to describe it than, all hell broke loose in a way. The run to almost steal the division and get into the playoffs, and then the extraordinary October run. I think the team went 21-1 after September the 15th, up until the World Series, of course, which is just an extraordinary run at that time of the season. I'm fascinated in, at that moment in time in particular, what was the atmosphere like? And I mean both at Coors Field during games, but also just in the locker room. Did you go out there at some points in that street just feeling like, we're just not going to lose today because we didn't lose yesterday or the day before, and something is just clicking? What was it like to be part of a streak like that?
Well, I think it was a slow burn in a good way, because all year long, we never got hot. We were 3 games under, 3 games over. We were never in it, but we were never out of it. And I just kept sharing with the men, "Guys, we haven't got hot yet." We'd grown together in '06. We had a bunch of young players kind of bond together that had won in the minor leagues together. So they were probably a closer group than any other group we had in 02, 3, 4, 5. 06, they were coming together, both pitching, defense, hitting, all of it. You'd see signs of it, but you didn't see the depth that some of the better clubs had. And then in 07, they started playing just with a little more swagger. And one of the reasons why I really believe was Tulowitzki brought an edge to our team that we didn't have before that. If you had a little edge, Tulowitzki helped you have more of an edge. If you had an edge, you had a bigger edge. If you didn't have an edge, you found an edge, or he was going to help you find it. It was one of the few times I saw a rookie come up and impact a clubhouse. And it wasn't just cocky. It was a swagger. One of the times I can remember him talking, it was guys I've never lost like this before. And I'm not about to start doing it now. We need to figure some things out. This was a rookie talking to a room full of guys that already had major league time. But he led by example as well. It wasn't just talk. So there was a belief that was probably never there before, that we can play, and we can play better than we've played. Well, you go in the middle of September, and I think it's still at the time where how many games to play, we were half a dozen games out. And then, like you said, we win a different way, we win another different way. It's another person, it's the other person, it's a pitcher, it's a hitter. And about a week into it, guys were showing up earlier. Guys were staying later. The crowd, the park was half full at BP, which the park had never been half full at BP. And the streets are getting crowded like they've never been crowded before. I mean, they've been crowded, but it was like opening day every day for about 3 weeks.
Wow.
As we went through that stretch. And the enthusiasm in the ballpark was contagious, but the enthusiasm in the dugout. Guys pulling for one another, different men. We had a lockdown bullpen. We had good enough starting pitching that we could use the bullpen when we wanted to, not when we had to. We fed off that. The position players knew there was games we could win 2-1, but we could win 10-9. And when you got players like Hop and Holiday on the corners in the outfield, you got a guy that can go get the ball to Barris and Sella. You got a go-go guy at second and Matsui. You got a young stud at short. You got Garrett Atkins and Todd Helton on the corners that both drove in 100 runs. And you got this catcher back there that ended up catching every one of those games, Jorvit Torrealba. It was a close, tight-knit group of men that truly wanted the others to be successful. One of the beautiful parts of all that was when Tavares went down, Ryan Spielberg and Corey Sullivan platooned in center field and did a fantastic job. So it brought some more people into the package as well. But truthfully, that 25 men in the clubhouse in September, you can extend the roster. We had a roster full of men. I think the team that went to the World Series had 21 homegrown players drafted by the Rockies through our minor league system, which is unheard of in today's game. But it was one of the most remarkable times that I've ever been in uniform to watch. Because what you felt like, guys, was like you watch your kids play in the backyard. And, they just keep doing things, and you just keep going, oh, my God. You just keep clapping. You just keep clapping, high-fiving, and trying to stay out of the way.
Man, I've got goosebumps just listening to you talk about it. I can only imagine what it was like to experience it all. I've got one last Rockies question, and I'll hand over to Ross to steer us away from that a little bit. I think it's a bit of a two-parter. Field, I think, has puzzled people for so long, right? In terms of how do you create a pitching staff that can be successful there? How do you help your hitters be successful at home and on the road? I think there's so many unique issues it poses to the Rockies, being their ballpark, being at altitude, that it seems like from the outside anyway, and I'm happy for you to correct me, that they've never quite managed to crack the code, if there even is one, right? I'm fascinated in how you look at it now in terms of what the way is to approach it, or how you have to do things differently, just knowing that is such a unique factor that other teams don't have to. And off the back of that, I guess, give me some cause for optimism about this team going into not just 2025, but I guess seasons to come, and maybe the direction of the franchise and the way it's going that's going to have the arrow pointing up.
Well, I would agree with you on we haven't cracked the code. We've had 4 playoff teams. I think 95, 2007, 2009, and then 17 and 18. We've never won the division. 35 years. I mean, it's
a tough division.
It is a very unique atmosphere to play in because there's nothing else like it in the major leagues anywhere. It is different challenge at home versus on the road. There's different scientific things that'll tell you it's different. Pitching, the pitch shaping. Obviously, balls go farther. And we tried different things. Early on, it was a ground ball mentality off the mound. Try and get balls to hit the ball on the ground. You put it in the air, it's going to ride out of the ballpark. Then the humidor came into play. We played I don't know how many years there without realizing that the balls were shrinking and getting harder and going farther because we were just putting them in a closet at 5,280 feet above sea level. So the humidor kind of slowed things down and made it a bit more normal. I do think in Colorado in 2007, I think we stumbled into the code. It's not like we said, okay, we're going to do this because of that. But we had power on the corners. We had strength of defense up the middle. We had 5 pitchers that pretty much all had different skill sets. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all. And then out of the bullpen, we had arm slots almost from 9 o'clock on your clock to 3 o'clock around the board, both right-handed and left-handed. The lineup, we could beat you different ways. We could beat you with power. We could beat you with speed. One of the things not many people realize is the defense we played that year. We set a field. It's a major league record still today for the fielding percentage set in the National League. And it wasn't a bunch of Gold Glovers. I mean, yes, you had Tulo, and yes, you had Helton. Both of them ended up winning Gold Glove. You had Garrett Atkins at third. You had Kaz Matsui at second. You had Holiday hopping the outfield. Tavares was a go-getter in center. But we played airtight defense. We had a lockdown bullpen. And again, our starters gave us what we needed. And I think sometimes different people get in different roles and situations. They try and recreate things. I just know this. If you took the team that won the World Series every year and put them in Coors Field the next year, they would win a lot of ball games because they play good baseball. And by recreating something or think you've got something on your hands that there's fear or there's anxiety, I think you worsen it. I still think we're structured to play good, solid defensive fundamental baseball. I do think you have to have variety on your pitching staff with arm slots and velocities and spin. But I also think you need to meet the pitchers where they are because you know what? You can still get away with hand-high fastballs or higher at Coors Field. A curveball still breaks. We ran away from some things based on what we thought were realities. And basically, it's never been more disappointing, the offensive value we've put on the field the last 2 years for the venue and the environment which we hit in, which is mind-boggling. And we're cutting some teeth with some younger players, but it wasn't all the younger players that are doing a lot of the punching out. Mm-hmm. So we have tried to, as far as just recalibrate. We started with the draft 3 years ago. We were short on pitching, so it was a big influx, 2 back-to-back years of draft, collecting arms. Moving some people around the All-Star break, moving people over the winter, winning some of the heavier contracts to bring in better contracts because we still have the money that's hard on the table with some people. But recreating a better pitching depth, a better pitching supply, creating more versatile and athletic ball players. Speed still needs to play at that level. Stolen bases weren't even a thing until, we got Doyle and Tovar and a few other guys now. That's been recreated. So I do think through the draft, we're finding our way back because we're going to be pushing good baseball players and good pitchers up to the major league level. We still play in a very challenging division. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. But, and I hate to use the word but, truthfully, and I tell this to people, I would not be with the Rockies if I didn't believe in what we were doing. I'm 67. And I don't mean that I'm on my death, but I have better things to do with my time. I'm not going to just show up and just, I'm a Rocky, I got a job. I believe we're making a difference. I believe in the direction we're headed in. The fan base deserves it. My goodness, we still draw almost 2.5 million people a year. We've lost 100 games the back-to-back seasons, and these fans are still coming out. It's time we fed the fans. And the fans, look, you're across the pond. I love that term. But you're a fan. You're wearing a Rockies jersey. I'm not sure what emblem is on top of Russell's hat.
Hillsborough Hops.
But I mean, we've got fans still global, that are around. I just know the joy I saw there in 2007 when we went to the World Series, and I just would love to be a small part of that again. That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm pushing for.
Man, I'm hoping for that too. I love the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously, as we progress a little bit through your career, then the seasons after 2007 didn't progress the way that you wanted. You were let go in 2009. you had a small stint with MLB Network to kind of like doing some kind of like analyst and broadcasting. Did you have the itch that you knew that you wanted to get back into managing pretty soon after you were let go and you were just waiting for that moment to happen, or was it a special conversation that you had with the Pirates that kind of brought you back into it?
I don't think that I ever thought that, hey, there's no problem. I'll just do this MLB thing because I got fired this year. Next year I'll be managing a team. Never gave that a thought. Matter of fact, the following year in 2010, it was pushing up to the winter, and I didn't have a coach. I had a couple offers, but they didn't make sense for me. And I was going to go back to MLB and sign like a 2 or 3 year deal as an analyst, and then John Daniels and the guys over there gave me a call about getting back into the game, and it wasn't a manager's job. But when they explained to me who it was for, the reasoning behind it, I've always been attracted to working for good people for the right reasons, and we have a common goal, and that's what we had in Texas. Now, after that year in Texas, I still wasn't thinking, okay, I'm just going to do 1 year in Texas and pop back in a dugout somewhere. It was a very good job, Russ. I could have been the hitting coach there. John was trying to keep me as the hitting coach there. I mean, for real. And then there was a couple teams. I interviewed for 2 teams that winter and got deep in both interviews. One was with the Mets and one was with the Pirates. And then I knew it at least became real because I kept getting interviews and I kept going. And the Mets said, oh, we're 3 weeks away. And the Pirates were like, hey, we want you to manage tomorrow. And I had to give that some time and some thought until the Pirates, I can't decide by tomorrow. Can you give me a little bigger window? They said yes. I went back, talked to the Mets because truthfully, everybody in my inner circle was pushing for me to go manage in New York. I was the only person that thought the Pirates job was a good idea. Because on the surface, 18 consecutive losing seasons, they had lost 100 games in back-to-back seasons. But I just kept being led. I have a faith that's real. And I was being led. I said, I don't know what it is, but I really believe that I'm meant to manage in Pittsburgh. I was attracted to the Pirates as a kid. They had the most god awful uniforms you could ever have, and they just beat everybody. It was just the family, the yellow, the black. When you go into Pittsburgh as a former player, you either loved Pittsburgh or you hated it. There was no in between. I always appreciated the hard-working mentality, and I thought, what a better place to have another shot. Blue-collar people, a handshake's real. They work hard for their money. They've proven to be a great fan base. They do it in hockey. They do it in football. They used to do it in baseball. I was just led to come to get back in that spot, and I fortunately landed a job and was there 9 years, and we had a really significant 3 year run there, which validated all my reasons for why I wanted to be there. And I feel very blessed to have had that opportunity. I think anybody in life, when you get a second opportunity, you have a shot to be better. You've learned things on the first one that there were things I did in Pittsburgh I never would have thought of doing in Colorado, and there's some things I thought you had to do in Colorado I didn't even think about doing in Pittsburgh. You learn as you go. And I was fortunate that I was given another opportunity.
And from that time, like in between, like I don't know if this is right or wrong from what I've read from bios or not, but this gave the idea that like this is where you picked up an idea about like sabermetrics, about like what additional things could be done. That you maybe picked up some of your time in Texas, some of the time actually at MLB Network, but that Pirates team that you then took on board was one of the really early adopters for things like shifting and that side of things. So how did you incorporate that sort of thing like into your management that second time round?
I had to tuck the grumpy old man in my back pocket and tell him to leave the building. And I want to applaud you guys. I did a little work. I talked to Josh, who you talked to about this podcast. He said, these guys are interesting. They're vested. They're all in. You guys have done your homework and your research. This makes this very enjoyable for me. But when I went into Pittsburgh, we were probably as invested in analytics as any team in baseball. Probably Tampa and Pittsburgh. We were doing things at the minor league level that no other teams were doing, the two of us. Over the course of the next 5 years, everybody in baseball got involved. But early on, it was us in Tampa. And I can remember the first year, them bringing things to my table, and I was like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean the third hitter on your team is not the most important hitter? I can remember this conversation like it was yesterday. And it was like, okay, well, this was a year after I'd managed. They go, well, Andrew McCutchen, you hit him third all year. And I said, well, yeah, that's because the baddest dude on your team hits third. I mean, Larry Walker, da 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 da. And they go, well, I know that's the thought, but Andrew McCutchen actually went to the plate 212 times with 2 outs and nobody on. And he's your best hitter. And I'm like, what? And I said, okay, you got my attention. Bring me more. So we started slowly taking small bites, slowly, then really setting an older guy, an old school baseball guy, and just sharing with him how meaningful some analytics can be. Not all of them, because not all new information is good. That doesn't make it good because it's new. Mm. But when you can put value to it, and then what we were able to do in Pittsburgh was to make a hybrid situation, human analytics, the eyeball test, the gut test, the nuts test, and take the numerical, the analytic part of it, leveraging your bullpen, leveraging your lineup, certain matchups against certain guys, and combine the two, which what made it meaningful and pulled everybody together. And to this day, I have a saying now I actually use in the book. I said it's not about old school versus new school. It's about being in school. And in Pittsburgh, I was able to find my way back into school.
No, that's amazing to hear, because like we've recently spoken to people like Kyle Bodie and Zach Scott, and they've always talked about the fact that like the culture is actually kind of like the keyest part of like for making those decisions. So I kind of tip my cap to you as someone who's come in and had their time in the place to kind of to give those individuals like the chance to show you what's what, and to kind of you to take it on board. It's always a difficult thing to change your own culture.
Well, change can bring upon controversy, but again, there's a man myth out there. I dug myself into this hole. I'll get myself out. So you're going to trust the guy that dug the hole to get you out? Look at them. Nobody bats 1,000. Nobody bats 1,000 in their decisions. And I took it upon myself to say, you know what? They've put some really smart people in this room. I need to trust and lean into them, and let's see how smart we can be together. And truthfully, when you win a Manager of the Year award, like I was awarded in 2013, it wasn't because I was the best manager of the year. I don't think it was because I had really good players. There's no manager that's team that finished in 4th place that ever won a Manager of the Year award. And some of the moves we made that year, whether it was Neil, whether it was Dan Fox, whether it was bringing kids up from the farm system, it was such a collective effort. And that was like it was in Colorado, but that's when you see success happen, is when egos are pushed aside, everybody's pulling together, and we really want to celebrate each other's successes, not just our own.
No, that's amazing.
I love that. I do want to ask you very quickly about 2013. We've taken up so much of your time already, so I do apologise, and we'll wrap soon. That 2013 season, you mentioned obviously how fun it was to bring winning back to Coors Field with the Rockies in 2007, and you did something very similar with the Pirates in 2013. Obviously 20 straight losing seasons, and then that amazing season in 2013. And I want to talk about that wildcard game specifically. And I'm not a fan of the Pirates, of course, but I vividly remember watching that game here in PNC Park, and the home run by Russell Martin, and just the chaos that ensued out of that one game. And I know ultimately, that the team didn't go to the World Series, but what did it feel like to bring that feeling back to a city that hadn't had it in such a long time?
Well, it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever been involved in, and for a lot of different reasons. One of the first things I did when I was in Pittsburgh is I went up to the people that sell the season tickets. And I said, look, I have no idea how hard it's been. I'm just telling you, I'm going to do everything I can to help make your job easier as we move forward together. Because when you win more games, it's easier to sell tickets. When you don't win games, it's hard to sell tickets. And they're the ones on the phone on the other end getting yelled at, getting bitched at, getting, whatever it is. To see the joy that season brought, downtown vendors, hotels, restaurants, every employee in the organization, especially the people selling the season tickets and the corporate sponsorships. To see that North Shore area just revitalized, and to know at that game, I don't think I felt the full impact of that game till later on in the winter, but there were there were kids at that game that were 25 years old and had never, that they didn't remember when they were 5, but had never seen a winning season. And a grandfather went with a father who brought his son. So you had 3 generations of people, whether it be female grandmothers, mothers and kids, at that game. Now the beauty of it is we hold 39,000 people. Today, if I go back to Pittsburgh and would walk around town, 75,000 people were at that game that night, because everybody will tell you that wild card game in 2013, that was the most amazing game. And it reminded me of when I first went to Pittsburgh and people were telling me about Mazeroski's shot against the Yankees, the walk-off homer in Game 7 in 1960. I heard so many people tell me about that, so I looked up Forbes Field. 38,000 people, and 100,000 people told me they were at the game. But I mean, that's the kind of joy it brings. Because you know what? People were at the game. They might not have been in the stadium, but they were watching. Who knows? Wherever, they were a part of it. They were invested. I've been on a run the last couple of years with a football team in America, the Detroit Lions. Oh. I've been a Detroit Lion fan for 62 years.
Wow.
It's been hard. But now the joy in the last couple of years, so it's just the joy. And there's a term for it, guys. You may have heard me talk about it. It's a Buddhist term. It's called mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A. What it means is showing expressive joy for the success of others. And that's what it comes down to. To look in those stands, I can remember looking in the stands during that run in Colorado, looking in the stands in Pittsburgh, and that, obviously through the 13 season. But then in 14 and 15, we won 98 games in 2015. But the stadium's packed every night, and to see people showing up, and just the family atmosphere, the joy, the game of baseball's magic anyway. But when you add the hometown team does good and they've got their favorite players and all that, it's just been one of the things that's made my motor run my entire life and still does. You can tell how excited I am talking about it now. So it was significant in a lot of different ways.
That's just the beauty of sport, isn't it? I think it's that being able to evoke those feelings in someone. That's extraordinary to hear. I'll ask my last question. I'll let Russ get one in too, but having managed the Rockies and the Pirates, I think there are similarities between those two teams, and I'm fascinated in sort of the way you look back at your experience of managing those two teams and maybe the legacy you have with those fan bases. I know you didn't end up winning a World Series with those teams, and sometimes that's all that matters, right? Is did you win a ring or not? Some people, that's all they care about. But I think for those two fan bases, and I'll certainly speak as a Rockies fan, the era we had when you were there was so special beyond the meaning of those titles or whatever it might be, but that feeling that you invoked in people, I think, and those teams evoked in people was so special. I'm fascinated in how you look back at that and how fans approach you even today, just looking back at that as a time that two teams that have been struggling for success and were desperate for something were able to rally around their teams in ways that they hadn't really been able to for so long, and even since then maybe haven't quite managed to get back to those highs again.
Well, I think when you're in the moment, you always kind of think you have an understanding of what's going on. And I did. I thought I had an understanding of what was going on. When you get fired and are asked to leave and your swipe card no longer works in either one of those buildings, and now you're removed, and it was during COVID that it all hit me like a wave on a beach, because they started replaying the games in Colorado on MLB Network. They started replaying the games in Pittsburgh. People started reaching out, podcasts, interviews, whatever. And it was almost like it was a recreation of the fan base that was saying, hey, we remember you. Hey, remember when or whatever. And to this day now, and some of it's probably got to do with the book, but there's been an appreciation that I probably never realized, that they're thankful. And they're thankful for the same reasons why I was thankful. It was an honor to be the manager of the Rockies. It was an honor to be the manager of the Pirates. And I took my job seriously. I didn't take myself seriously. I didn't bat 1,000 with the decisions I made, but I gave it everything I had. And I think the acknowledgement of those fan bases now, that they're appreciative of that. They've seen a lot of things since then in both places. And they're reaching out now, just thanking me for my service, thanking me for my efforts, the community, whatever it was involved in, that makes it very special. And it makes it like a big warm hug. And to this day, if I go back and say Rocktober, boom, the conversation starts. And I was here. I remember this. And if I go back to Pittsburgh and all I got to do is say, raise the Jolly Roger, and they're, oh my gosh, 13, 14, 15, what, and the things that happened there. So it's pretty significant in the fact that there was no World Series championship, as you said, because that is what a lot of people hold on to. But what I found out is what people really hold on to are the relationships you build with them and the time that you're with them and the way you go about your work and represent their team. And that's what I feel good about, that I always honored the name on the front of the jersey. And I try to take care of the name on the back because that was my family. And I think the fans have been appreciative of that.
Couldn't agree more.
No, that's amazing to hear, and I kind of feel that my last question now, which is completely and utterly random, is gonna fall flat slightly afterwards. But I kind of wanted to know do you know that you were managed in the last tied game in Major League Baseball?
I didn't know that, but I do know, because every once in a while somebody will ask me to do, they'll do a bio on me for something, and they'll put my record down. They'll put wins, losses, and then they'll put a 1 like after. And I'm like, what's the 1? And I go, oh my God, we had a tied game, and I'm trying to think if it was Miami.
No,
I think it might have been.
it was against the Cubs, I think, in 2016.
Okay.
In 2016, it was like a September 29th game that just got rained out, and there was no need to play it for once the season ended. So, but that is the last tied game. Obviously, one could happen in the future in MLB, but as it stands right now, we have not had a tied game since then.
And I'm going to hang my hat on that, Russ. And I'm going to give you one other meaningless stat that I can hold that's still true today. If I ask you, and this is a loaded question now, but who hit the last home run at Metropolitan Stadium in Minnesota, your guess would not have been me. But I hit the last home run in Metropolitan Stadium before they tore it down and built the Metrodome. Now, the funny thing was the third baseman was a good friend of mine, Pete McCannon, who later managed in the big leagues with the Phillies. Pete hit a home run like in the bottom of the 7th. And he was running the bases like he just hit a walk-off, thinking, because we all knew it was the last game, there was going to be a last of everything. He ran the bases, and he's waving his arms, and the people come out and they're high-fiving him. In the top of the 8th, I hit a home run. As I'm running around the bases, he meets me at shortstop in my ear, yelling at me while I'm running around third, and actually hits me with his glove as I'm around third base coming to home. And not many people know that I hit the last home run at Metropolitan Stadium. And I've got the last tied game as a manager. Those are the kind of things that, legends are built of right there.
Probably one of the only home runs you're getting booed by one of your own players for hitting as well.
That is amazing.
I know, that's great.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure, Clint. Thank you so much.
I'm glad we pulled it off. I had no idea what to expect, and you guys are good fans. You're good people. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, we've had such a blast chatting with you. I could literally sit here and ask questions for hours, but I won't. I will say thanks so much for joining us, and I would encourage people to buy your new book, of course, and check that out, but also to follow you on social media. You're very active on social. An amazing message of positivity and joy, so people should check that out, and obviously check out the work you're doing with Rockies as well this season. Best of luck with that, and I hope we get a chance to catch up soon. But thanks again, Clint. We really appreciate it.
If either one of you guys ever get over to the States, let me know. We'll find a way to connect.
Really kind. Thanks so much, Clint, and thanks everyone for listening. Goodbye.